Today's objective is the student will be able to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. So completing the square is another way to solve quadratic equations, obviously, if you couldn't tell by the title of this. What it is it creates a perfect square trinomial that we can easily factor. Well, what is a perfect square trinomial? A perfect square trinomial is something like this. X squared minus 2ax plus a squared, or x squared plus 2ax plus a squared. Okay, these are both trinomials that can be easily factored. Now, what the factored versions of these things look like, here we have x minus a times x minus a, which is x minus a squared. The reason that the middle terms are negative here is because this middle term is negative, right? If you were to multiply these two things back together, right, x times x gets me x squared, negative a times x is 1 negative ax, negative a times x is another negative a times x, so that gets me negative 2ax, and then negative a times negative a is positive a squared. This is just a condensed version of these, right? A minus a, or x minus a times x minus a is x minus a squared. Okay, same thing over here. The factored version of this trinomial would be x plus a times x plus a. And the condensed version of that is going to be x plus a squared. So it's really easy to factor here. If you have a perfect square trinomial like this, all you have to do is take x, plug it in. Take a, plug it in. And then look at the middle term. If the middle term is negative, this middle term is negative. If the middle term is positive, this middle term is positive. Okay? So what we're going to do with this is we're going to take trinomials that are not perfect squares and we're going to make them perfect squares. Okay? Bear with me here. So we're going to look at example 1. Example 1, like I said, is not going to be a perfect square trinomial, but we're going to help it get there. So example 1. Okay, we have m squared minus 8m minus 12, or sorry, plus 12 equals 0. Okay, so we're trying to solve this quadratic equation for m. Now, the way we do this, by completing the square, we have to follow a few steps. The first thing we have to do is check and make sure that the number in front of m is 1. Obviously, there's no number here, so it's automatically 1. So we're good to go there. Next, we have to make sure that the third term, or the c term, gets pushed over to the right side of the equal sign. And we do that by subtracting it from both sides. So we have m squared minus 8m equals 12. That's what we're left with. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're going to actually complete the square. We're going to take this middle term, this negative 8m, and we're going to divide negative 8 by 2. Then we're going to square it. Okay, so negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. We're going to square it, and that gets us positive 16. Now this positive 16, if I add it to both sides of the equation that I have, this m squared minus 8m equals 12, if I add 16 to both sides of that equation, on the left side, m squared minus 8m plus 16 is going to be a perfect square trinomial, because the square root of 16 is 4, and 4 plus 4 gets me this 8. Okay, so bear with me, we'll get there. So we're going to add this 16 to both sides of the equation. On this side, I had this negative 12. And we're adding 16 to it as well. We have to add 16 to both sides of the equation to keep things even. We're going to go ahead and simplify the right side. That gets me m squared minus 8m plus 16 equals 4. Okay, so here, like I said earlier, we have a perfect square trinomial. M squared minus 8m plus 16. This side is a perfect square trinomial, and we can factor it using the method that I showed you earlier. I'm going to go ahead and write it on this side of the screen now to give me some more room. So I have m squared minus 8m plus 16 equals 4. The factored version of this, what we do is we look at this negative 4 over here. The factored version of this is going to be m something plus or minus something squared equals 4. What goes in right here? It's this piece, this middle piece of this completing the square. This is what will always get plugged in right there, this negative 4. Okay. M minus 4 squared is the factored version of this. So from here, all we have to do is solve this equation for m, and we can do that using the square root property that we talked about last week. We can take the square root of both sides and solve two different equations for m. I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite this. We're going to take the square root of both sides, and I'm left with, sorry, these will cancel out. I'm left with m minus 4 equals 2, or m minus 4 equals negative 2. These are the two equations that I have to solve. I have to take the positive and the negative square root of this 4, okay? Because the square root always has two possible solutions. From here, we're going to solve for m by adding 4 to both sides. Over here, m is going to equal 6, and on the other side, m is going to equal 2. These are the two solutions to this equation, m squared minus 8m plus 12 equals 0. Those are the two solutions for this equation that we found by using the completing the square method.